Hashtag the island nobody wanted. The island's secret wasn't buried in the ground. It was waiting for my dog to remember it. I'm a broke Navy SEAL who bought an island nobody would touch. My dog found out why nobody lived there. If you'd explore an island like that, type a 1 in the comments. If you turn the boat around and leave, type a 0 and tell us where you're watching from. My name is Wyatt Reed. When I bought Hollow Cedar Island, I thought it was just a cheap place to disappear after losing everything. But the moment my retired military K-9 stepped onto that shore, he started acting like he'd already been there. As storms rolled over the mountains and strangers came out of the shadows, a mystery that had been buried for 32 years started clawing its way back into the light. My pickup coughed and rattled up the last stretch of mountain road. I tightened my grip on the wheel and stared through the windshield at an endless wall of pine. The road hugged the edge of a dark mountain lake and vanished in a mist drifting low over the water. Beside me, Duke sat upright in the passenger seat, ears forward, amber eyes never still. For almost 8 years, that German shepherd had ridden beside me through every chapter of a life I never planned. He was there when I left the Navy. He was there when Emma died. He was there when the bank took the house. And he was there through every freezing night I spent sleeping in truck stops and forgotten parking lots across the West. Duke never complained, never judged, never left. I glanced at him and managed a tired smile. Almost there, partner. His tail thumped once against the seat. That dog understood more than most people ever gave him credit for. The road finally opened onto a small lakeside town that looked frozen in time. Weathered storefronts, a faded diner, an old church on the hill watching the water. People outside a coffee shop stared as I rolled by. I knew what they saw. A graying man in old clothes, driving a truck that should have been retired years ago, with a shepherd riding shotgun. Most folks look right through men like me. These days, I preferred it. The marina sat at the end of the road, a handful of boats bobbing against wooden docks. And out past them, across the dark, cold, beautiful water, sat Hollow Cedar Island. The reason I'd driven over 400 miles. The reason I'd spent nearly every dollar I had left. $900. That was the whole price. $900 for 12 acres of forest and shoreline nobody wanted. The online listing had looked fake. A few blurry photos, no history, no explanation for the price. Just coordinates, a deed, and a number to call. The seller had sounded almost desperate. 3 days later, the island was mine. Inside the dock office, an old man behind the counter looked at Duke first, then at me. "You read?" I nodded. "You the one who bought Hollow Cedar?" When I said yes, something tightened around his eyes. I asked about transport across. He grabbed a set of keys, then stopped me before I turned away. "People don't stay long out there," he said. "What?" He just looked toward the fog on the lake and walked away. Outside, Duke had gone rigid, staring across the water straight at the island, a low growl rumbling in his chest. He rarely growled without a reason. Overseas, that sound had meant danger long before any human could sense it. "You actually bought it?" A woman stood near the next dock, mid-30s, dark hair under a ranger's cap, green field jacket. She put out a hand. "Claire Bennett, conservation officer." I shook it. "Wyatt Reed." She nodded at the island. "You know the history of Hollow Cedar?" I didn't. "Then whoever sold it to you left out the important part." The breeze shifted, and she folded her arms. 32 years ago, a family lived on that island. One day, they just disappeared. The whole family. Nobody ever found them. The case was never solved. When I asked why people wouldn't talk about it, she shrugged. "Fear." Duke growled a third time, eyes locked on the trees across the water. Claire noticed. "So did your dog," she said quietly. Then she told me to be careful, and she left. I looked at Duke. Those were the same eyes that had watched my back in deserts thousands of miles away. The same eyes that pulled me through nights when grief nearly crushed me. You and me, buddy. Either way, I had nowhere else to go. For the first time in years, a place belonged to me, even if it came with secrets. The crossing was silent. The captain wouldn't talk. When the leaning dock came into view, he looked relieved to be rid of me. He dropped my gear, untied the boat, then hesitated. "If you hear things at night," he stopped, shook his head, and pulled away before I could ask anything. A narrow trail led inland, and the forest swallowed us whole. The temperature dropped under the canopy. Duke walked slightly ahead, nose working, occasionally stopping to study something I couldn't see. An hour later we found the cabin, weathered cedar boards, a stone chimney, a few cracked windows. After years in a pickup truck, it looked like a mansion to me. Inside, dust floated in weak sunlight. A cast-iron stove sat in the corner. Someone had once loved this place. That much was obvious. Emma would have loved this view. The thought hit like a knife, the way grief always did, quiet one moment, full force the next. Duke pressed against my leg without a sound, the way he always had. It grounded me. It always did. That night, I woke after midnight, instincts snapping me alert. Duke was standing rigid, facing the front door. Through the window, far beyond the trees, I saw it. A brief flash of light, gone almost instantly. A flashlight. On the island. Not on the mainland. Here. The light appeared again, then vanished into the pines. Duke growled low, the same growl he'd given at the dock. Someone else was here. The island wasn't as abandoned as everyone claimed. By morning, the place looked innocent again, but I wanted answers. We followed Duke into the forest, and something strange became obvious fast. He wasn't exploring. He was navigating, moving with the confidence of a dog returning to familiar ground. A dog who'd never set foot on this island in his life. Hours later, he stopped in a clearing where the remains of an old stone lodge stood, half swallowed by vines and trees. Duke went straight to the center and started digging, hard, fast, focused. Under decades of dirt and roots was a wooden trapdoor, deliberately hidden. I pulled it open. Cool air rose from the dark. Wooden steps led down into a chamber that felt less like a bunker and more like a room someone had abandoned in a hurry, meaning to come back. Shelves, crates covered furniture, and photographs, hundreds of them. Families smiling by the lake, kids fishing off docks, birthdays, holidays. The Vance family. Every face belonged to someone who had vanished. Then I found the journals. The early entries were ordinary, fishing, construction, family. But the tone darkened over the years. Strangers near the island. A feeling of being watched. Hidden routes. Escape plans. One line kept repeating. They're getting closer. The final entry was rushed, half a page. Asterisk, someone has reached the island. If we disappear, trust the guardian. Asterisk. Nothing after that. The story just stopped. Duke pressed his nose to the journal, then looked up at me, and for a second his expression seemed almost human, like he recognized something. Claire came back the next day, and we spent hours piecing the family story together. The Vances had been wealthy. Robert Vance owned timber operations and big tracts of land. They didn't just walk away from money, property, and vehicles overnight. The journals read less like ordinary caution and more like preparation for something dangerous. While we worked, Duke walked up to one of the old maps and touched his nose to it. Once, twice, 3 times on 3 specific marked spots. Small circles and triangles, no explanation. Is he doing what I think he's doing? Claire asked. I didn't have an answer, but we copied every marked location. That afternoon, another boat arrived, bigger, older, a commercial fishing vessel. The man at the wheel was in his 60s, weathered, broad-shouldered, gray beard. Earl Whitaker, he said, all easy smiles, holding up a cooler of fresh trout. Neighborly welcome, but his eyes kept drifting to the journals on the table, and to the documents, and to Duke. He asked questions, harmless ones. Asterisk, found anything interesting yet? How much of the island have you explored? Asterisk, just enough to plant a seed of doubt. After he left, Claire watched his boat disappear. I don't fully trust him, she admitted. I can't explain it. That made 2 of us. A few days later, we followed the marked map north. Duke moved with that same impossible certainty until he froze over the ground. Boot prints. Fresh ones, sharp-edged, untouched by the previous day's rain. They led to a clearing with an abandoned campsite, a fire ring, a tarp shelter, ash that was only days old. No ID, no personal items. Cleared out almost professionally. Someone had been living here, and they didn't want anyone to know. A branch cracked deep in the trees. Duke growled. We backed away. When we got home, the cabin door stood open. I'd locked it. Inside, nothing was damaged, but the wooden box was open and several journals were gone. Not all, just enough. Duke pressed his nose to the back window and looked toward the woods. The intruder hadn't come by boat. They'd come through the trees. Claire arrived later with a folder of old records. One newspaper clipping had a handwritten note attached, mailed anonymously to the sheriff 3 years after the family vanished. 6 words. They're still protecting the island. 32 years. And somehow the mystery was still alive. The storm came that night. A boat crossed the lake in the rain, and a tall man knocked 3 times. Early 50s, lean, sharp eyes that noticed everything. Daniel Pierce, he said. I've spent 15 years researching the Vance disappearance. He talked about unsolved cases across the Northwest, said the official story was nonsense, said the family didn't simply disappear. What do you think happened? I asked. Murder. He kept circling back to specific things. Maps, hidden locations, landmarks. Whenever I mentioned the journals, his attention sharpened. A man searching for something specific. Before he left, his eyes landed on our copied map, and I saw recognition flash across his face. Be careful who you trust on this island, he said. Some people have spent a long time protecting secrets. Then he was gone into the dark. 2 men, Earl and Daniel, both connected to Hollow Cedar, both clearly hiding something. Duke led us north again, to a narrow opening hidden between 2 boulders. A cave. Inside, the chambers widened into a cavern big enough for a small house, and someone had been using it. Shelving, crude furniture, blankets, lanterns. Emergency radios on a shelf, one of them cleaner than the rest. Recently touched. The cave wasn't just history. It was active. A side tunnel opened into a smaller room. A cot, a desk, old books. On the desk, a faded photograph of the Vance family by the shoreline. And at the edge of the picture sat a German shepherd. Young, powerful, alert. Same coloring, same markings, same intelligent eyes. The dog in that picture looked almost exactly like Duke. I looked at the photo, then at my dog, then back again. There were more photos, the same shepherd, always present, always close to the family. Then Duke guided me to a metal box hidden in the stone wall. Inside, sealed in waterproof wrapping, was a note. The ink had faded, but one line was perfectly clear. If anyone finds this, the island remembers. The night Earl came back, I knew it was different before he said a word. 3 boats cut through a building storm, headed straight for the island. Through the binoculars, lightning showed me men in rain gear, moving with coordination. And at the front of the lead boat, Earl Whitaker. No smile this time, just determination. He'd never been helping. He'd been watching, managing access to this island for decades. His voice carried across the storm. Wyatt, we need to talk. We know what you found. The men spread into the trees, moving to surround the cabin. Containment. I recognized the tactic. I grabbed the documents and a pack, and Duke and I went out the back into the rain and the black forest. Behind us, flashlights and shouting. The pursuit had begun. Duke led the way, fast and certain, choosing routes no human would, like he knew this island better than he had any right to. We made it to a sheltered ravine and stopped. When I reached Claire by satellite phone, her voice was tight. Noah Reyes, a local teenager who'd been helping her with records, was missing. He'd left home that afternoon, the same time Earl's men started moving. That night, Duke led me to an old ranger outpost, light glowing in one window. Through a crack in the wall, 2 of Earl's men argued over a map. One line reached me clearly. Earl says the kid stays put until Reed gives up the documents. They'd taken Noah, not lost. Taken. Near midnight, Earl's voice crackled through the satellite phone, calm and cold. You have something I need. I have something you need. Tomorrow you bring the documents, and the kid goes home. Then the line went dead. It wasn't about old journals anymore. An innocent kid was leverage now. At dawn, the island looked like a world under siege. Waves crashing, pines bending under the wind. The old pressure rose in my chest, the tightening, the racing thoughts. PTSD never announces itself. It just arrives. Duke pressed against my leg and pulled me back into the present. A figure came out of the rain. Daniel Pierce, soaked, urgent. Grant took the boy. I know, he said, then handed me a photograph in a waterproof sleeve. The Vance family, and one of the boys, maybe 10 years old, smiling by the dock. The resemblance to Daniel was unmistakable. My name isn't Daniel Pierce, he said. It's Aaron Vance. The missing family. One of the children had survived. He'd spent 32 years trying to prove what happened, and every trail led back to this island and to Earl Whitaker. You found more in 3 weeks than I found in 30 years, he said. And Earl's scared. He's making mistakes, the kidnapping, the attack. Desperate people get reckless. Engines roared across the lake. Aaron's face went dark. Earl's moving to the caves. It's where everything started. He looked at me, and probably where it ends. The caves were flooding. Water seeped through cracks, turning tunnels into rivers. We moved deep into the network with Duke leading, and on the way Aaron asked how long I'd had him. 9 years, I told him. Retired military breeding program. He stopped walking. The Van Cess didn't just own land, he said. My father employed private security. They used working dogs. The original kennel stood near the northern cliffs. He looked at Duke. The shepherd in those photos, his name was Scout, bred from a bloodline developed for tracking and wilderness security. My brother loved that dog. After we disappeared, several dogs from that line entered military programs. I looked at Duke. The scents, the landmarks, the hidden trails. None of it was coincidence. Generations of working dogs had been trained on this island. It was in his blood, his instincts, his memory. We waded into a flooded chamber where the walls were carved with names and dates. Aaron's flashlight stopped on one inscription, and the color drained from his face. Asterisk Robert Vance. Margaret Vance. We never left. Asterisk. His family hadn't disappeared. They died here. Then Duke growled. Flashlights ahead. Voices. And a younger, frightened one, Noah, alive. Earl was bringing the boy deeper into the caves, toward us. And it hit me. From the very first day, through instinct and memory and training, Duke had been leading me to exactly this moment. To the truth. To Aaron. To Noah. We crouched in the dark as Earl reached a central chamber lit by lanterns, floodwater swirling around his boots. Noah sat against the wall, soaked and exhausted but unharmed. Earl's voice carried easily. It should have stayed buried. 32 years, and you still couldn't let it go. Aaron stepped into the light. Earl froze. Nathan, he started, then caught himself. I should have known. You murdered them, Aaron said. The water rushed. The storm roared overhead. Earl looked away. They weren't supposed to die. The confession landed like a blow. My agreement was simple. Take the money, take the land, make them leave. But Robert wouldn't cooperate. He fought. Everything went wrong after that. Greed disguised as opportunity. A confrontation that destroyed a family. 32 years of hiding the evidence. Then the cave gave a deep crack, and a surge of water slammed through a side passage. Lanterns toppled. Panic spread. For the first time, real fear filled Earl's eyes. Not of justice, but of dying inside the place where he'd buried his secrets. A slab of stone broke loose above Noah. He never saw it coming. None of us did, except Duke. He launched himself forward without a command. Pure instinct. The debris missed Noah, but it caught Duke, and he went down hard into the water. Duke! Every lesson from my SEAL years came back. I fought through the current, found him, pulled him free. One foreleg hurt, breathing hard, but alive, and still trying to protect. Aaron reached Noah. The kid was safe. The chamber trembled again. If we stayed, none of us would leave. Even Earl understood it. His shoulders sagged. The decades of lies were finally over. Claire had reached emergency responders before communications failed. Rescue teams arrived as the storm weakened, and one by one we came out of those caves into the rain and the daylight. For the first time in decades, the truth left Hollow Cedar Island with us. Months passed. Earl Whitaker faced justice for what he'd done to the Vance family. The evidence from the caves finally told the whole story. Aaron got the answers he'd chased most of his life. Not perfect closure. Nothing gives you that. But the truth, and sometimes that's enough. Noah recovered fully, with Claire by his side through all of it. And Duke, the old K9, carried scars out of that cave, a slight limp that never fully went away. He never complained. He just never stopped watching over the people he loved. The biggest change was the island itself. Aaron donated most of the property, and we turned Hollow Cedar into a wilderness retreat for veterans struggling with trauma, for retired working dogs, for families rebuilding after hard times. A place where broken people could heal. A place to belong. For me, it was personal. For years I drifted. Truck stops, temporary jobs, one gray day blending into the next. After Emma died, hope had quietly slipped away. But the island gave it back slowly. One sunrise at a time. One spring morning, almost a year after I arrived, I stood on the rebuilt dock looking out over a calm lake, the mountains mirrored on the surface. Duke sat beside me, older, scarred, a little stiff, but his eyes still bright. I rested a hand on his neck, the same way I had 1,000 times before, the way that always reminded me I wasn't alone. Not anymore. The island nobody wanted had become the place where people found their way back to hope. And beside me sat the dog who led me there, the partner who never stopped believing there was still a path forward. If you believe loyalty and perseverance still matter, drop a yes in the comments. And if you've ever had a faithful dog or a friend who stood by you through the hard times, I'd love to hear your story. The truth has a way of coming to light, and good people who keep going usually find their way home. Subscribe if you'd like to ride along for more stories about justice, dignity, and the strength to keep moving forward.